Good afternoon, High 10 partner, wonderful real estate agents. We are so happy that you are here to do an overview of some of the more common contracts. This should get you more acquainted with the grid if you've been away for a while. So I will share my screen. I am recording so that if you need to go back and look at it, I believe that Rhett posts these by date. So just note the date and let me get started. So we're going to start with the residential listing agreement. I will only be going over the grids, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I've left the contracts. They will populate as they come from the contract, right? So you know you have disclosures with them. So of course the agency disclosure is here. We always have to have that. I even would like you to do it even if it's a residential lease less than a year. Please still do it because there is a rule that if it's a year or less, you can get away without it. But we like to see the agency. Okay. So this is your residential listing agreement. So date prepared would be today. That is just a reference date. So that if you're referring to this particular agreement, you can refer to this date. Exclusive right to sell. You would put the seller here. Hereby employs, what is our name? High 10 Partners, Inc. So we're going to put High 10 Partners, Inc. in the broker name. We do DBA as a couple of other businesses. We have Coldwell Banker Commercial, George Realty, and we are also processing through the DRE High 10 George Realty. But you can always use High 10 Partners, Inc.
I've been putting High 10 Partners Inc. George Realty.
Oh, just put High 10 Partners Inc. Yep, that's okay.
Okay.
It's all right. So High 10 Partners Inc. and exclusive right to sell. We're going to put the address here. What is this city? What county is this property in? And what is the zip code? The parcel number. You can look that up on Real List Tax on the MLS. Okay. So the listing period. So there is a maximum length. We'll go through that first, not to exceed 24 months. However, if it is an LLC or corporation or partnership, it can exceed that, but we don't see listings that long. So the beginning date of your listing would go here. Now, mind you, just because you prepared it that date, this could be a different beginning date. So whatever the start date is and the end date would go here. Usually we see 6 months, somewhere in that range. Okay. So property specific listings. If this is a manufactured home, check the box. It's going to populate a form. Or if it happens to be a probate, check that box. It's going to populate that form. Compensation here is not fixed. It is negotiable. So coming down here, this gets a little bit confusing on the additional compensation. So C1 right here, this is the percent only for the listing agent. That's it. You can't build in an extra 2% or 1.5% to try to cover another agent. So don't do that because there are audits on these. So we just want to make sure that we're with the, following the way that the law was intended, which is only the listing agents here, or sometimes you may have a dollar amount, but we're usually expressing with a percentage in sales. So this is C2, additional compensation. If you check that box, you can put a percentage here or whatever you deem. So normally, oh, thank you so much, Anna. I didn't know so many. So normally for the additional compensation, now why would we check that as a listing agent? Because buyers can come in unrepresented, okay? An unrepresented buyer means they refuse to sign a compensation agreement with any agent, including you, and they tell you, I don't want you representing me, I'm not going to be represented. But an unrepresented buyer is going to cost you work, right? You're going to have to sit through the inspections with them. You're going to have to open the property when they need to go through, things like that. You're going to need to prepare all the disclosures, which you would do as a listing agent anyway, but you're not representing that buyer, and there's forms to make it very clear to them. We do not want to establish agency relationship with a buyer who does not want to be represented. But you may open the doors for them when they need their inspections and things of that nature. How much is that worth? I'll leave that to the professionals of you guys to decide. I've seen a % in here, or 0.5%, whatever you deem, you want to put in there. And that is for an unrepresented buyer. So you decide what % you want to put in. Okay. So on C3, I like this filled out. I like a continuation because I don't want somebody going around the back of me. If I've done the work, I've presented the property to them, I've talked to the other agent, all of that stuff, I've been showing up for them. I want to be covered after the listing agreement. So I usually put 90 calendar days here. When you are listing a property, you want to make sure that there's no other broker that has an agreement. That is something you would ask at the top. Hey, are you under contract with another agent? And then they'll answer you. If they happen to be, then you need to write it here. Okay. Items included. There maybe the seller doesn't want to remove that refrigerator, or they don't want to remove a freezer that's heavy. So if they're electing to include items and they tell you about it up top, sometimes this comes about through escrow. Note it here if they know right away. If there is an excluded item like that fancy chandelier, make sure you're excluding it, and don't forget to put that in your counter if it is still attached, okay, to the property. There may be fancy statues that are movable in the yard, fountains, things like that. So anything that they want to take with them, even if the fountain isn't latched down, concreted in, if it's sitting there, people will assume that's theirs. So even if it's a movable big fountain, make sure that you are excluding it so there's no hassle during escrow or, argument later. Leased or liened items, will cover these together. Do they have a solar panel system that has a lease on it? When it's liened, it's on the title report, Andrew. It'll show up as a lien. So I just encountered a water softener lien, which I had never seen before, but they have that, okay? So these are the things that you ask the seller. Alarm systems, a lot of times, there is a requirement to go through a certain alarm company. So you may want to find out about that and see if they can disconnect it or whatever, if the new buyer doesn't want that particular alarm company. Smart home features, if there's any included, list them here. If they want to exclude any, list them here. We are CRMLS. We will market the property in CRMLS. That is our primary. So you can put that here, CRMLS. Okay, that's our primary. So seller does authorize the agent to market the property, consider offers, asking for concessions. In our brokerage, we don't want to mention compensation. So we're not gonna mention any compensation when we list this property. Let them come through on their offer, okay? We don't put anything about compensation, nor do we check the box about compensation in the MLS. You see here, there's a box to check that it says check box in the MLS if it's permitted by the MLS. So we don't want to check any of these. We let the compensation come through on the offers. Seller instructs broker not to take or use for photos in marketing, except as required by MLS rules. Maybe they have expensive furniture or things like that. Maybe they don't want pictures of the whole entire house. So that is something they would need to tell you up front before you go over and hire a photographer. Timing and presentation of offer. Seller instructs the broker to present all offers as they're received, or maybe they have a date in mind. So if that's the case, you would need to check the box and put the date. I usually leave this open, but that is again up to the seller, and you discuss that with them. Do you want the offers one by one? Or do you want me to hold them for 10 days or whatever the seller wants to do? That's up to them. Investigation reports. It automatically checks the natural hazard. Disclosure report. Sellers shall pay in order for these reports within 6 days, the beginning date of this agreement. Usually I don't put anything else in there. If they have homeowner association, I always mention in trainings, we want to jump on that fast because the homeowner association doesn't care about your timelines and your contingencies. So that may be something you can discuss with them. Yes.
A quick question. That's that's usually the escrow or our job?
Escrow will order it, but sometimes I'll ask the seller, do you have their number? Let's ask them how long, and I'll call the homeowner association. Hey, once we ask for the documents, how long does it normally take to process? Those are things you want to know because you don't want to blow the contingencies, you know, or have to extend, because we've seen some go for over 30 days.
Yep.
They don't follow our timeline. So we need to make sure we know that. But I don't check anything here, even if that, but I do jump on the homeowner documents ASAP to find out how long it's going to take. Seller opts out. So we don't check these because if you check these, we can't put a lockbox or we can't put a sign unless that is the case, unless they don't want the lockbox or sign. But normally you leave these blank, okay? Additional terms. The only thing I could think about is maybe a 1031 exchange subject to something like that. But usually this is blank. Remember, if this property resides in a trust, make sure that you're checking the box and having that trust advisory signed at the time of the listing. Signed at the time of the listing. And once you check the box, it does automatically attach, okay? Broker's compensation advisory is already built into this agreement. So I'm going to stop there. We are going through the grid sections. If we need further discussion, we will do that, but I want to get through everything today that I had outlined. So now I'm going to move over to the RPA. Is that what I had up next? Did I have the RPA up next?
Oh, you're talking about the staff?
No, what, the RBC. Okay, we're going to go, excuse me, I'm sorry. We're going to go to the buyer representation and broker compensation. So these are very important forms. So make sure, even for leases, there's a TRBC. It's called a TRBC. Make sure that you are executing on these, and that's both for residential and commercial. So it comes populated, of course, with the agency. We always want that done. Let me get down here. So we're going to go over the grid on this just as a refresher. So date prepared would be today. Who am I representing? I put the buyer's name here. The broker is High-10 Partners, Inc. So coming down to the representation period. Okay. So this agreement, if you look right down here, we cannot exceed 3 months on this agreement. So don't go over 3 months, okay? If agreement is, it could void the agreement if you exceed it, okay? Unless the buyer is an LLC, corporation or partnership.
It has to be 90 days.
Yeah, so you put the beginning date here, not to exceed your 90 days or 3 months here. Okay. So that's the first thing. Type of representation. We always want to have an exclusive. We want to make sure if we're out there working that we get paid. that they, you know, that they stick with us as their agent, because if you're not exclusive, they can go and do business with other agents, you know, if you leave it non-exclusive, okay? Property type, it does default to a single family residential, or you can exclude it, including, and this SFR does include condos, manufactured homes, okay? So if you're going to show them any other property types here, you note that they even have a checkbox for commercial. Go ahead and check those. They have 5 or more units, which is a commercial property. Go ahead and check it. Location. I like using county, because if I niche myself into cities, maybe I want to go to a different city. So for me, I'm going to use LA County, Orange County, Riverside County. I like counties, but that's up to you. If it's very specific and they're like, I'm only going to this one city, then yeah, sure. But I like to use county just to open myself up. So
just check
counties, and then put the county that you're going to be showing in. Unless they're like adamant that I'm only going to look at Alhambra, then okay. But I just like to put the county just to give myself more flexibility.
Michelle, really quick, in D1 property type, if you don't check, it defaults to single family residence.
Yes,
right?
including condos and manufactured homes, which would also be townhomes, okay? So location, additional description, if you need an additional description. So this box here on C, you can check and fill out this form, additional buyer preferences and priorities. That's up to you. Normally, we don't do that. Have a conversation, know what they're looking for. This is just our normal talking when we are working with a buyer. If you feel you need the form, go ahead and check it and fill it out. But just having a good conversation with them, you should know. But if it helps you, check the box and fill out the form. Property excluded from representation. Are they on contract with another broker? You need to know that, okay? So make sure before you even start this process that, hey, are you working with an agent? Are you on contract with another agent? Is it exclusive or non-exclusive, okay? So here it tells you again that the rate is not fixed by law, the compensation. This is the buyer's compensation only. We usually express it in percentages. So you can put your percent here. Payments received from broker or seller or others. So it's telling them right here, if the broker receives compensation from the seller or other people, it will post against this amount. So if they got 1% from a seller, but in this agreement, it said 2.5, they would be responsible for the additional 1.5, okay? So whatever you get paid through others, such as the seller, it reduces the amount of compensation for the buyer, okay? So I, again, always use the continuation for payment for broker involved properties. If you were out there working with them, cover yourself with 90 days on this, on E3. Cancellation rights, non-exclusive, is effective upon receipt, or you could check the box and put 5-10 days after receipt, whatever you can agree on with the buyer. Exclusive, the cancellation effective 30 or not to exceed 30 days after receipt. So you can leave it at 30. Okay, so that gives you a little more protection too on the exclusive. It's a longer cancellation process. Time to deliver buyer personal financial information. You can attach a form. I don't do that. I feel that's the lender's information that they should be collecting. However, as we all know as seasoned agents, which we all are in here, make sure that you have that lender letter knowing what they qualify for before you even roll with them. I don't fill this out because I don't want to get into all of that. Some people don't want to tell you their finances. They don't feel it's your business. They just want to give you the lender letter. You know, they don't want you digging all the way in with them. Okay. Very important box on G2. Super important. If you're interviewing the buyer and they say, I want to work with you. I want you to be the one that helps me get this property, but I saved up the down payment. I've got all my closing costs. I don't have additional funds to pay your compensation. If they tell you that, check the box. We have a fiduciary duty. We must check the box. So the buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay you. So now what? So we're going to go down here. So 9B2. So what does happen if they don't, let's see, it's 9. I'm sorry, going blind. 9B2. Okay. So if they don't have the funds to pay you, so you're going to say, I understand. You know, you have your funds to close the property, but not for compensation. I'm going to ask the seller to pay. I'm going to put that in the offer. So you tell them you're going to do your best to get it into, you know, through the seller. I'm going to ask for it through the offer. So you do ask for it through the offer. Even if they had the funds, you're always going to ask, right? So what happens with that offer? What if the seller says, oh, okay, you asked for 2.5%, the seller's only willing to give you 1% or 1.5%, or they're willing to accept it, which would be great, or they're not willing to compensate you. So they can go 3 ways, the seller. And by the way, most of the deals we're seeing, and Anna can confirm this, the seller is cooperating. So the seller is cooperating because it's good for them too. They want to sell the property. But you can reassure this buyer that I still will work just as hard for you. I'm going to do my best to get this compensation from the seller. Okay, so that is a protection from them. If they do not have the funds, please check the box because they do not owe you. Let's say the seller only pays you 1.5, but you asked for 2.5. That's your commission. They don't owe you that additional point. Okay, so but if a seller says, and I haven't seen this, so you know, but I'm just saying, if a seller says I'm not paying any, then you can step out of that deal, and there's a form to do that because you can't work with no compensation. So if the seller refuses to pay any compensation, you can step out of that deal. But we have not seen that happen. Well, I've seen reductions. Sure, they'll counter it down some, but they're not completely zeroing out the buyer's agent.
That with a counter offer on that, on the compensation, or no? Once they counter it down, that's it, that's what we have to accept?
Oh, no, counters
Okay.
can go. You
Okay.
can re-counter, but you have to be strategic.
So we don't-
How hot is this property? Are you in a multiple situation? You know, it's all those strategies that you need to be thinking about. Is this a property that my buyer's in love with? You know, you need to be thinking of all these things and be strategic in how you're countering.
What's the name of the form to step off?
I'll pull it up. Okay. Okay.
So Michelle, E1.
E1?
The buyer's compensation.
Mm-hmm.
So the percentage that we put on the E1 section is the maximum we can get.
Yes,
Say if I put 2.5, the seller said, I'm only gonna pay 1.5, then I'm gonna get 1.
right. If you've checked the box that they don't have the funds to pay your commission. Now, if that is an unchecked box, then the buyer should come up with the additional point to pay you, to compensate you.
When we redo our BRBC with them, if they, you know, I've changed my mind on that, after looking at it and now I'm buying a more expensive house, they'll only pay 1.5. I know I said 2.5, and we redo the BRBC with them to the 1.5.
Okay, but why would you want to do that?
Because they can't afford it. Now they can't afford it because maybe initially they were looking at a 1.1 house and now they had to go to 1.2 with all the competition.
Yeah, just get it approved through us and then I wouldn't redo the BRBC. I would just come back to management and say, hey, you know, because they had to go with a more expensive house, this is all I can get from them. They do not have the funds, but just let us know ahead of time. but I wouldn't redo the BRBC because the BRBC has to be done prior to offer or at the latest at the same time. So don't do it afterwards. Don't step into that property and then do it afterwards. Do it at the same time, you know. Wait a minute, I said something wrong. Excuse me, not with the offer. When you step foot in that property, you should have had the BRBC already. If it's the same day and then you're going to show that property on the same day, that's okay. But don't do it afterwards after you've logged in and been in that property. Okay, that's one of the rules of the BRBC. Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's say I put 2.5 on E1.
On E1, 2.5.
Seller agrees to pay 1.5.
Yes.
Is the buyer responsible for that 1%?
They're responsible if you did not check G2, that the buyer does not have sufficient funds. If that is left unchecked, then yes, the buyer is responsible for the additional point. Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, so that BRBC, is it good for one property showing or while I'm representing the buyer?
While you're
One property.
representing the
But-
BRBC, that's why we want to put the county, and it
Okay.
coincides with your representation period, right? Your 90 days, and try to go exclusive,
Okay.
okay?
Excuse me, I have a question about E1.
E1.
You put there's what you wanna get compensated from the seller, right?
From your client and or seller. Right? It's not, okay, so you can't think of it from the seller, right? This representation agreement is what the buyer will pay you as a broker, but then you tell them, hey, the offer has a built-in section. I'm going to try to get that from the seller. I will do my best. I'll negotiate. I'll put it in the offer. But you can't automatically think it's going to be the seller, right? Because they may renegotiate you.
So you put 2%, then the seller has to pay you, either the seller or the buyer, 2%.
Seller doesn't have to pay you anything. You requested in your RPA in the offer, right? And they have 3 ways to go: accept it, counter the percentage or whatever you asked for, or reject it. And like I said earlier, most sellers are paying compensation. I don't think we've seen one where they're fighting to pay you 0. No, they're mostly paying because it's good for the property. So they have 3 ways to go. It's not guaranteed. But once you put that percent in this amount of compensation, don't put a higher amount on the offer. Don't go in for 3% when you only put 2%. You can't do that.
So if the buyer is willing to pay the 2%, then you have to check the box we're talking about, the last box that you talked about, right?
No, if they don't have sufficient funds. It's not that they're not, when you interview the buyer and you go through the scenario, they've already met with their lender, they got their down payment and closing costs, but maybe they don't have enough in that fund to pay your commission. If they tell you that, you need to check the box here in G2. You have to check it because you got to cover them. If, you know, our fiduciary, right? So if they tell you they don't have the funds to pay compensation to the buyer's agent, then you need to check the box.
Also, the way I look at it is, what do I want to get paid as an agent? 2.5, you put 2.5. You have to talk to your buyer and say, hey, are you able to pay me? They'll just say, oh, I don't know if I have enough funds. So you're gonna protect them by checking that box, right? And then you're gonna ask the listing agent, hey, how much is the seller willing to pay, right? For my commission. They might say, oh, only 2. Then the 0.5 is now your buyer will pay, but if you check that box, your buyer's not obligated to pay that 0.5.
Because they don't have the funds.
So then we can
Yes.
cover back at 2.5, right? For the seller?
You could, but again, it's strategic. If you're in a multiple situation, you know, there's a strategy because you may, you know, maybe it could be down to the commission. I don't know. You know, all the terms and conditions apply, right? When the seller's making a decision, they're looking at the package in a whole. What's it gonna cost me? You know, blah, 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 and all the terms. And one of the terms happens to be the commission. So that would line up. Yes, you can counter, of course.
Depending.
Yeah, but be strategic, you know, like we are with any counter offer. When we, you know, because we're trying to get the property for our buyer.
Since, we changed the whole subject about if the seller has to pay the commission or not, maybe I've had 2 offers where the buyer had to pay. So it hasn't been too bad.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of business with these forms. Yeah. But sometimes the buyer, like, let's say there was an investor that was coming through on a property. Those investors, normally they're not going to ask for commission because they're just out to get that property. So a lot of times, like if it's a property that is attracting investors, they're not going to ask for commission from the seller. They will pay the agent themselves, right? So those are the types that could be somebody that's not asking the seller for any commission. Okay, so let me go. Okay, so I am gonna buzz through the grid on the RPA just as a refresher for us all. Of course, that comes populated with the agency. So here we go. We're gonna do the grid section. This will get you to where you can fill out your offer. And make sure we're covering everything. Date prepared. All of this information up here will be filled out. Remember, if there is an agent in our brokerage that has the listing and you're in High 10 Partners brokerage as well, we are dual. If not, you will each represent your own if it's from a different brokerage. Okay, so let's go. The purchase price, you fill it in here. If it's all cash, make sure you check the box. That'll make you competitive, more competitive. Close of escrow, check here. How many days after acceptance? 30, 40, whatever you put in here. Or if you have a lucky date or they want to put a specific date because it's a good date or whatever, put it there. Normally we're seeing 30 days after acceptance. Expiration of offer, I let it default to 3 calendar days after the buyer signs.
So on the B, if you wanna put that 45 days or sooner, can you write it or you wanna allow you to?
It's not going to go or sooner. It'll only let you put a figure. Yeah. If you want to be, you know, that specific, I guess you could typewriter or sooner, but I would leave it at 45 days. Any seller would probably be happy if you close it sooner. But, or you can type or sooner here, okay?
Well,
Or write it, but have all parties initial it, that they see it. Because anytime you put your pen on it, you got to get it initialed. And even with the typewriter, you should have it initialed. So let the expiration of the offer, you can let it default to 3 days, but maybe it's a property where you feel like it's really hot and there's probably going to be a bunch of offers. Maybe you want to extend this expiration date to 5 days. That's up to you. So if you feel like there's a lot of activity on that property, you know, you can extend it if you want. Initial deposit goes here, right here. And normally a listing agent, if you don't have 3% in there of the purchase price, they will counter you. 3% in residential is the liquidated damages amount. So they're always going to look for the 3% or you're going to get a counter. Within 3 business days after acceptance, it needs to go to escrow by wire transfer. That is the default in the contract. If you select a different way, like let's say a cashier's check or personal check, and escrow says, no, I can't take that method of payment, it does revert to wire. Escrow has the right to tell you how they can take the payment. Okay. So even if you wanted to do a check and escrow said, I can't handle a check, you got to revert back to wire. Increased deposit. We normally don't see this too much on residential, but if you were going to increase the deposit, you would check that box. Let's say you only put 2% in and you said, okay, I'll increase by 1% after the contingencies. You could do that, or you could increase it beyond there. if you want, to 10%. Remember, you are capped at 3% for liquidated damages if the deal goes, to that point. Okay. But I normally in residential, you're not going to see an increased deposit. Okay. So you're going to put the first loan amount here, whatever amount they're borrowing. This contract does default to conventional. So if you have an FHA, VA loan, make sure you're checking the appropriate box, or if it's seller financing, which is rare in residential, check that box. Now, FHA or VA, they have down here that there's a list of lender required repairs. So what you need to know about those particular types of loans, which a lot of us in here have closed them, that the lender can make a request, it's usually through the appraiser, for some repairs. What are they looking for? Safety items, a broken window, chipped paint, things like that. They can request, and I've been in those deals where they said, the garage door is chipped up, it all needs repainting, we had to do it. Or cancel the deal, because the seller can say, I'm not doing any repairs, right? Or they can cooperate to close the deal. Another thing about FHA or VA, and the appraisal contingency does stay in play for for the duration of escrow, excuse me. Okay, so just a couple of little things to know. We've all closed those deals. It's been fine, but be prepared that the appraiser can call some things. It's normally safety issues or something like a wire hanging in a weird place, things like that. Okay. So, and if I were looking to take this kind of offer, even as long as I've been doing this, I will still call their lender and I'll say, what kind of things, and I will do it. Would the appraiser be looking for? What kind of lender repairs may you be requesting, or what would you be looking for? What types of items? It's always good to kind of call them and ask them.
Sort of feel them out.
Yeah, fill out the lender and then also check on, the buyer. So the occupancy type is primary. It defaults to that, or it could be secondary or investment. Okay. So, seller to credit buyer, we don't see that, here unless, if they already talked to the listing agent, we're going to ask for closing costs or something. It will default to closing costs. Okay, so if that's the case and you're requesting a credit, put it here. And I always mention, talk to the lender. Don't leave money on the table, because if the lender can't take $10,000 credit and they can only let you allow $7,000 at the closing table, if you've lost $3,000. You can handle it a different way. You can request what the lender will allow, and then, you can do something on the purchase price. Okay. So make sure the lender blesses that amount. Just see how much that they'll accept. Seller payment. This is, okay. So this is your very, very important box, G3. We're going to check the box because we're going to ask for compensation. Okay, so I'm going to put the amount right here. I'm going to put 3, let's say. Okay, but that amount does not exceed my BRBC. I'm not going to exceed my BRBC because the seller can verify that. They can verify it. So make sure you're not exceeding it. And here the buyer does affirm that they had an active BRBC. It's right here in writing. And that this is not exceeding what was in the BRBC. Okay, so they added this recently. I can't remember how many months ago, but there's an affirmation that the buyer is affirming that that is correct. Verification of all cash attached to the offer, or how many days after acceptance, 3 days after, are you going to provide it? If you are making an all cash offer, it's prudent to include the verification up front. It makes your offer a lot stronger. I always black out the bank account number to the last, couple. I don't like to leave their bank account. I'll take a black Sharpie and black it out, because I just don't like it. But of course, they're going to be looking for the dates and the address. When you are reviewing these as a listing agent, Make sure it's the same name that's on the offer. And the dates are recent, within the last 2 to 3 months. And the name is important. We've had people submit, and then we'll go, who's that from? Oh, that's, my uncle. Well, your uncle's not on the contract, right? So you need to make sure that the names match. Very important, because I've had that 2 times, I think. Verification of down payment would be the same. You're going to verify through the lender, or they can provide a bank statement or something of that nature. Verification of loan application, that should be attached, and you're going to check box which type it is. Is it a pre-qual? Is it a pre-approval, etc.? So normally you're going to have that attached. You don't wait until 3 days after acceptance, because they're just going to counter you anyway. Okay. Final verification 5 days prior to close. That you do need to do. You need to go verify the property is in the same condition as when they made the offer. Make sure all the debris is out. If you requested a refrigerator, that it's going to be left. Those kind of things. We have had accidents where somebody promised the refrigerator in the contract and then they accidentally took it, so it had to come back. So I've seen that once. So you always want to be over there verifying the condition of the property. Assignment. They did build this in about a year ago. It's good. They only have 17 days after acceptance to make an assignment. That means to their own LLC, if it was an individual that had a wholly owned LLC 100%, that's fine. But because you don't need to re-sign everything. But if they make an assignment to somebody else, be aware that you're going to have everything re-signed by that person. The deal will still be the same way, but the new assignee would have to sign everything, okay? Pardon me?
Can we take that out of can the seller say, I don't want it to deal with reassignments?
I guess you could, but you would need to see, it could be that they want to assign to their own LLC. Or you could put a 1 day on there, you could significantly take down the days. So maybe what you're trying to prevent is, I think what maybe you're thinking of is somebody locks the property into escrow and then they're running around looking for an investor. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
So you could take the assignment days way down or counter it out. Yeah. Okay. So loan and appraisal, they give you 17 days. And if there's no loan or appraisal, because it's a cash deal, or they could still have an appraisal within a cash deal. So you don't have to take that out, but check these boxes if those are applicable. This box means here, if we have $1 million property that we made an offer on, but we're okay if it only appraises at 950, but we're still going to pay you $1 million because we have the cash to bring that deficit in. So if the property, we offered $1 million, but it only appraises at 950 here, they're going to put like a 950, right? But it's $1 million property. So as long as it appraises at 950, we're good to go. I'm going to pay the difference. You don't see this box used very often. Investigation of property, 17 days after acceptance. That's when you're going to do your termite inspection, property inspection, roof inspection, sewer line inspection, whatever you deem necessary. I will tell you that sewer line inspections are good. I was on a property, $15,000. They shot the thing down, got the estimates because it had, crumbled. Nobody knew. But the estimate was $15,000, to fix it, which was fine. And everybody negotiated, the deal worked out. But had they not, and I represented the seller on that one, but had they not shot that sewer line down, nobody would have known. Okay. So informational access to property, I recommend you leave it open the same days as you do the investigation. That's if they want to go in, check things out. It's not a contingency. Maybe they want to measure, maybe they want to get a contractor in to tell them how much that bathroom remodel costs, things of that nature. Insurance, 17 days after acceptance. As we all know, we're having insurance problems in obtaining policies. So make sure the first day in escrow that your client is calling their favorite insurance carrier to check on the policy. And I don't know if you need to up those days, to 20, but you need to check right away, okay, on the insurance. Review of seller documents. Those are disclosures that the seller provides you. You have 17 days. Preliminary title, the same. Common interest disclosures, those are your HOA, things of that nature are all 17 days, okay? Time of possession upon recordation. Now, if they can't move out right when it records, or it's not a vacant house, you may want to reconsider that and check. And they'll counter you because you won't know this right away. But the seller may want to stay 3 days after close or longer than 29 days. But at any rate, if it's 29 days or fewer, you need to do a form. And if it's over 30 days, you need to do a lease agreement after the sale. So even if it's just 3 days, make sure that you cover yourself with the forms that they tell you to do in here, just to be safe, okay? Occupied units by tenants. If you know there's tenants in there, I would, you may not know this writing the offer, but you can certainly ask when you call the listing agent, do a TOPA. Even if it's an 18-year-old living with family, do a TOPA that's not paying rent. If it's Uncle George in the other bedroom, do a TOPA. Because what that will do is, it's naming that there's a tenant in there, whether they're paying or not, but that you want it vacant, and that the seller will do their best to deliver vacant. You, as a listing agent, you have 7 days to deliver the documents, the disclosures, to the buyer. If you need more time, you can up it, but normally, we're on top of those way ahead of time. Sign and return the escrow holder provisions and instructions. They did add this about a year ago. They give you 5 days, which is good. And so go ahead and do that. Time to pay fees for the HOA. So they're asking in the offer that the seller order the HOA docs within 3 days after acceptance. Smoke alarms, water heater bracing, carbon monoxide. Make sure those are already installed or done. It can be negotiated between who does it, but it's better the seller do it because they have access to the property. Okay, so let me come down here.
Oh, the gas.
Yeah.
Or-
Items, that's right. The gas can take forever if it's off too. That's the other thing. Make sure that if it's a vacant house, everything is on, including the gas, because that can really honk you up. It could take a while sometimes. Items included, it defaults to the bathroom mirrors, but make sure you're checking these if you want that refrigerator, stove. I'm really weird. Even if they say attached, I still am going to check that microwave. I want to make sure that it stays there, even if it's attached. I'm like, I don't know, I'm probably a little OCD, but I'm still checking the box on everything I want. The buyer wants. So make sure that you do check the box if there's additional items, like maybe there's a potted plant on the porch that the buyer would like to keep. You could see if they'll, allow you. Oh, here it is, potted. You could do that. Excluded, if you already know, because the listing agent told you that they're excluding a chandelier or something, it's probably, you could always just put it in the offer because they've already told you they're not going to give it to you. Okay. Natural hazards, normally a seller pays. Environmental is good to always check. It gives you some additional coverage. It's not much more money. It's maybe $20 provided by. You could put seller's preference, or you can add somebody there. A lot of times the sellers already have those items. So, I just usually leave it at seller's preference if I'm representing a buyer. This one that says optional wildfire disclosure, I leave it blank. I don't check anything on that. So if you need, okay, so A and B, let's say you wanted a termite report. You could annotate it here on A. You could put termite report to be paid for by seller. But remember, the report does not clear section 1. So the second line, you would have to put section 1 termite clearance, and then they have report here. However, they have built this into the request for repair. So if you want to not add the termite here, don't, because you have a chance during your inspection to do the termite inspection, and there is a section there where you can request section 1 clearance. Normally, I do not add termite onto these offers. Smoke,
Michelle, I see, sorry, I see that they put home inspection there.
yeah, you can, and that the buyer's gonna pay for the home inspection. That's great. Yeah, they can put that there. And then you're gonna remind me with the 295 when we get down there, smoke alarms, etc. That is negotiable, but usually you're always gonna check for the seller. Now, as a buyer's agent, you're gonna really pay attention to Q5 and 6. That's the government required point of sale inspections, etc. And the next one is the corrective remedial actions. I always check seller when I'm representing a buyer. And then the listing agent will most likely come and they're going to counter it out. But you want to be checking ahead of time. You can call the city and see if there's any required inspections. We do get inspection lists from title company, but you just want to make sure that it hasn't been updated and we've missed a city. So unless you know 100%, just go ahead and call the city counter.
I mean, if you are the listing agent, I always highly recommend that you already order your prelim, you order your
Yeah.
city report and your NHD, because you're ahead of the game. If there's any problems before you get an offer, you can try to take care of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things on the prelim that you may need to clear. There's maybe some items that you can just call the title officer and it can be cleared very quickly. So you do always want to be jumping on the prelim right away. It doesn't cost unless you close, right? On any of this. So it's better to jump as fast as you can.
City report.
NHD.
Escrow fee, each to pay their own. Usually it's seller's preference, but you can always specify somebody. Owner's title insurance, seller, and then the buyer's lender title insurance policy is always paid by the buyer. But here you always put seller, and you can specify a title company or put seller's preference. City and county taxes, I always put seller when I'm representing a buyer just to cover them. So HOA fees, preparing those disclosures default to the seller. If there is an HOA certification fee, that is a buyer's expense. HOA transfer fees, if you're representing a buyer, you're going to check to the seller. And private transfer fees does default to the seller, or you could check it to the buyer, but I would just leave it at the default. Here is the
Q16.
Q6. Go ahead and explain it.
So Q16 should reference compliance fee of $295. And normally, if you represent the buyer, that's who you're gonna check. And so what happens is the lender doesn't see that fee in, might not agree for you guys to collect the $295. It'll be more of a battle for you at the end for having escrow collected on your behalf. So it's very important under Q16 that you indicate compliance fee of $295.
Okay.
So you write 295 and
You put $295 compliance.
And who pays that?
Normally, it's your client that would pay for it, but if your client refuses to pay it, then it's gonna fall on the agent. Okay.
So that was Q 16?
Q16.
So 295 is the check buyer?
Yes, 295 compliance fee.
Yeah.
Compliance, 295 compliance, because fee is already here. So you just 295 compliance.
Only the seller paid. Each listing, the seller paid $295.
Oh.
But this is a purchase.
Yeah.
Purchase to even buyer, buyer.
On your listing agreement, you also have an area for the $295.
And that's,
So here you see home warranty plan chosen by buyer. Very important words. Let them choose their home warranty plan. We don't need to be choosing it for them as a listing agent. So if they have a certain type of policy that they're going to be seeking, you can type the name in here. They can ask the seller to pay that, or the buyer can pay it, or they can waive it, which we don't recommend. So let's say the seller's gonna pay, but you want to max it out. Call your home warranty rep and ask them how much for this policy, just to make sure that you have enough money. Now, on this section, the seller can counter that money down, or they cannot pay for the home warranty, okay?
This one about termite. The termite part.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying that you checked out and then,
No, I don't. You can check it into the offer, but I don't. You know why? If it's, okay, so you're involving the lender at that point. Okay. Because unless it's a cash deal and you check that in, you just involve the lender. Right? Because now they have access to a copy of that report. You involve the lender. So I don't do that. If I need to do termite inspection, I go through the process of the request for repair. It says right on the request for repair, X amount of money for section 1 clearance.
so leave it blank?
Leave it blank
Oh.
because you do not want to involve the lender in that. You just want to handle it during the repair cycle. Okay, that's why. Yeah, there's always a little reason why. Yeah. And secondly, you know, you ask the seller to sign that, they might not have a termite report. They don't want to sign a blank check for section 1 clearance. Because when you present your RR, you're going to have the cost and you're going to attach that with your inspection report. So then they can make a decision at that point. Okay.
Is the compliance fee of $298?
Ninety-
If we $295, if we don't check anybody off there, then if the agent decides, I'm gonna pay for it, then you don't need to take this off.
I don't think so.
So she's asking if she's gonna pay for it, should she disclose it or not? Well, you should.
Oh,
That's what
on
she's
here?
trying- Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's see. I don't know what you would put there though, because it's buyer, seller, or both.
No,
No?
I'm saying you could disclose it there, but you can make the decision, let me know that you're gonna cover it, so like that, I don't send the COA banker addendum to your escrow for collection. I'll just notate that you're gonna pay. And it'll be deducted from your commission.
Even if I pay buyer. check
Yes,
off buyer.
Okay, so we completed the grid section. I'm gonna go over 2 more things that are very quick. And we saw something recently on a multiple counter offer, so I'm just gonna breeze through that super quick because I know we're at time. So seller multiple counter offer 1. Okay, so you're gonna fill all this out. What the terms are, if you can't fit them there, you would check C addendum 1 or whatever, okay? And even if I check that box, I'll say C addendum 1, just so they notice that it's there. But anyway, we're gonna get to the signature section. So the seller makes this multiple counter. They sign here, right? Send it out to all the buyers. Maybe there's 3. Now, the buyer can accept this, right? So let's say they're like, okay, good, I'm going to accept it. So maybe I'll be the one to get this property. In order for this to be a binding contract, and most of us know this is a refresher course, just have the seller sign section 8. Because if they don't accept that buyer, then it's not binding. They need to accept the buyer by signature. And we've seen some confusion on this, but they do need to. Now, that's not all buyers. You're going to make your selection of the ones you multipled. Which buyer does the seller want to select? Make sure that you communicate that back by signing 8A. And then down here, the buyer ratifies the acceptance and agrees to the terms of this seller multiple counteroffer. Once the seller re-signs and accepts them, then the buyer signs and we're all good to go. Okay? So we just want to make sure that you understand that because we've had a couple of problems. And I'm going to correct one of my mistakes because I want to punch myself when I say something that I don't think is right. So I'm going to correct it really quick and then we're going to be done. Mixed use addendum. So this mixed use purchase addendum, you can click this into the agreement to make it a mixed use purchase addendum. Now, if it's new, the whole form will make sense if this complex is new. but a lot of times you're reselling, right? So if you're reselling, you're gonna only fill out section 1. You want to know how many residential units, how many commercial units. And if you can get the description of the commercial space, that's fine. You can ask the agent, like, are there restaurants or whatever? But the main point is to fill out the residential units versus and the commercial units. Here, down here, you're going to put all parties are aware that this is a resale unit which was built in 1999. Right? So that alerts that the rest of the form is not applicable. You always want to disclose, even if it is abundantly clear that you're staring at a mixed-use complex. We need some kind of disclosure.
Repeat again, all parties are aware.
All parties are aware that this is a resale unit in a mixed-use development, which was built in whatever, 1999.
Where did you fill that in? What you're saying?
I would just put that in C. I would just make that disclaimer. And the reason why is you need to be very clear, even though it's abundantly clear that they're staring at a mixed-use building, we do need a disclosure.
Say that again. What was that?
All parties are aware that this is a resale unit contained in a mixed-use development, which was built in whatever year. And you can also, on the other box of your Avid, you may certainly put that the unit is contained in a mixed-use development. Why? Because some people may have an aversion to noise. They may feel like there's going to be a smell from a restaurant, so you need to disclose this, okay? So there's, you know, just to be safe for all of you, just the one, and then you would, you know, the rest would be non-applicable for an older unit, okay? You can just strike through it. Okay. So I just want to correct myself on that because I think I said something wrong before. Okay, so are there any questions? We're ending at 2:05.
So everything you gave me for the listing is in here, and everything you gave me for a purchase is in here?
Yeah, but mind you, there's tons of disclosures.
Okay.
So, yeah, we just have, so go ahead. Okay,
Talking about making
Oh.
sure that you sign in that little midsection.
yes.
Talking about for the final offer, right?
Yeah, for the final selection
Not-
only. No, not all of them. Like if you have, yeah, one. Because we've seen, some of them come through and they're in escrow, but they didn't execute, right? On number 8 and so we need to do that to make it binding, just to protect yourself, make it binding, yeah.
And in the past, the agent of the buyer had to confirm that they received it or that the buyer.
Right, it's
received it.
down here. I'll show you. It's a ratification, they're calling it. So down here, once the seller selects that one buyer, only one, then the buyer re-signs down here after the seller signs in 8A. The buyer says, the buyer ratifies the acceptance and agrees to the term of this multiple counteroffer. That is after 8A is signed by the seller.
But it's only on a multiple counter offer.
Yeah.
Multiple counter. If they use just a regular seller counter offer, that does not apply.
Yeah, that's right. They're not re-ratifying or whatever they want to call it.
Yeah, I need the other two, it's Freeland, the other one, we should get.
City report and NHD report. And again, the only thing you have to pay upfront will be the city report, and that is gonna have to happen anyway.
And
But
the house is in the county, we get a county report?
no, you have a list of all these cities that require, yeah, and maybe we could,
Yes.
send that out. maybe-
So I want to ask you, because this is a good turnout, are you guys more interested in refresher courses on disclosures and things like that? Is that something that people would be interested in? Okay, so I'll put that one up next because honestly, like I was telling Anna today, maybe I'll call the car hotline. Every day I learn something new. So we'll do a refresher course on every disclosure for our residential purchase. Okay, And then that'll help all of us and it helps me grow and learn too, because there's always something. Yeah.
He changes daily.
So we'll do that next week, okay? Thank you all. Thank you. I'm grateful for your attendance. Honored to have you here. Thank you, everybody on Zoom.
Was this, class recorded?
It's recorded.
When is it gonna be available?
It'll be up tonight. You look with Rhett.
You recorded?
Rhett will post it on YouTube. I need to give you the link. And then, it's by date.
You're gonna give us a link, you say, Michelle?
Pardon me?
You said you're gonna give a link for the
Yeah,
posting?
Rhett will have it posted up tonight. And then if you don't have a link to our YouTube, Catherine, I can send that to you too.
Would you do that for me, please?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sweetie.
Thank you all. Appreciate every one of you.